question hit Evelyn Carter before she even realized she was shaking. Is this what survival has turned you into? The words were not spoken aloud, yet they echoed inside her as she clutched the half-rotted potato to her chest. Snow swirled around her feet. The world smelled of pig slop and winter rot. Her fingers were stiff, burning with cold, and somewhere behind her, little Anna tried not to cry while Rose wheezed against her sister's shoulder. The girls were starving. She was starving. And the potato, soft, sprouted, barely edible, felt like the last thin thread holding her daughters to life. A heavy voice broke through the wind. "Ma'am, put that down." Evelyn froze. In the doorway of the barn stood a tall man in a worn coat, his silhouette broad against the gray sky. The rifle slung over his shoulder made him look dangerously calm. She held her breath, bracing for the inevitable. Handcuffs, humiliation, the sheriff, losing her girls forever. But when he stepped into the cold light, she saw no hatred in his face, only exhaustion and something like disbelief. "You stealing from me?" he asked quietly. Her throat tightened. She wanted to lie, run, scream, do anything but stand here trembling. But her voice cracked instead. "My children. They haven't eaten since yesterday." Behind her, Anna shifted, pulling Rose closer, as if hoping she could shield her sister from the man who held their fate. The man exhaled slowly. "Name's Jonathan Reeves," he said. "And you walked into the wrong storm." The wind howled around them, harsh enough to cut skin. Snow was coming down harder now, drifting against the barn doors. Evelyn tightened her grip on the potato, as if it were a weapon she might somehow wield. John watched her carefully, not with suspicion, with calculation, like someone measuring the edge between danger and compassion. "You'll die out here," he said. "We'll die anyway," Evelyn replied, her voice thin. John's gaze traveled to the girls, Anna standing stiff and protective, Rose slumped and feverish. He lowered his rifle. It took a moment for Evelyn to understand. Few men in Colorado lowered their rifles for strangers, especially desperate ones. "Come on," he said. "Storm's getting mean. You don't have to trust me, but those girls need heat." Fear twisted inside her. She didn't trust him. She couldn't. The world had taught her that kindness was rarely free. Yet when Rose coughed, a weak, rasping sound that barely stirred the air, Evelyn felt her resolve break. Pride was useless if her children died tonight. "Follow me," John said, already turning toward the path leading to his cabin. "Slowly. Keep the girl close." The trek through the snow was brutal. The wind slapped their faces, drove icy needles into their eyes, made every step heavier. Evelyn staggered more than once, catching herself only because Anna clutched her coat, refusing to let her fall. John walked ahead, steady and silent, glancing back just often enough to make sure they hadn't collapsed. The cabin emerged like a ghost through the storm. Small, sturdy, smoke trailing weakly from the chimney. John pushed open the door, and a rush of warm air spilled out, carrying the scent of wood, stew, and something Evelyn had not smelled in weeks. Safety. Inside, the fire crackled with soft, welcoming pops. John helped ease Rose onto a cot near the hearth. The child rolled weakly, cheeks flushed with fever, eyes unfocused. Evelyn knelt beside her, smoothing damp strands of hair from her forehead. "I'll get water boiled," John murmured. Evelyn's pulse raced. She was in a stranger's home, a man she didn't know, with her daughters, with danger everywhere, inside and out. But she couldn't deny the truth. Warmth was already seeping into her limbs, thawing fingertips that had turned nearly blue. Her children breathed easier in the heat. John set a pot on the fire. He moved with a quiet precision, like a man used to doing everything alone. The room was filled with the soft crackle of flames. the whistling wind outside, and the faint, fragile breaths of her daughters. "Why help us?" Evelyn whispered. John didn't look at her. "Because someone should have helped my family, and no one did." The sentence hung between them like a wound. Evelyn didn't ask more. She didn't need to. Pain recognizes pain. Anna inched closer to the fire, rubbing her hands together, eyes wide and wary. John noticed the shoes, cracked leather, barely holding together, and without a word, set them near the heat to dry. His gaze flicked toward Rose, noting the fever, the hollow cheeks. Something hardened in his expression. Determination, maybe. Or memory. "You'll stay the night," he said. "Storm won't let anyone out." Evelyn's heart thudded. The thought terrified her. But outside, the wind roared like an angry beast, shaking the walls. "Just tonight," she managed. John nodded. "Just tonight." He ladled hot broth into a tin cup and handed it to her. She hesitated, but the warmth radiating through the metal made her fingers tremble with grateful agony. She took one sip, then handed it to Anna, who drank as if she were swallowing life itself. This was not trust, not yet, but it was mercy. And mercy, even in the Wild West, was a dangerous, unforgettable thing. As the blizzard raged on, sealing them inside together, Evelyn realized the truth. Survival had pushed her into John Reeves's cabin, but fate might have kept her here. The storm outside deepened, and something just as powerful began to stir within. The storm did not let up the next morning, nor the morning after that. Snow pressed against the cabin walls in heavy drifts, swallowing the world outside in a white silence, broken only by the distant groan of wind. Evelyn Carter woke to the muted glow of firelight and the unfamiliar warmth of safety, though her body refused to believe it. Instinct made her sit up quickly, heart pounding before she remembered where she was. The cabin. The storm. Jonathan Reeves. Survival bought by mercy she still didn't fully trust. Rose slept close beside her, skin warm but no longer burning with fever. Anna lay curled near the hearth, clutching a folded blanket John had placed over her in the night. Every gesture he offered felt too kind, too dangerous, too unlike anything the world had shown Evelyn since her husband died. John stood at the table, sharpening a knife with slow, controlled movements. His eyes flicked toward her as she shifted. "Morning. How's the little one?" "Better," Evelyn answered, smoothing Rose's hair. "She's breathing steady." John nodded once. No smile. Just that quiet acknowledgement she was learning was his way. He set the knife down, poured water into a tin cup, and handed it to her. Their fingers brushed, just a passing touch, accidental, but electric enough to make Evelyn retreat a fraction too fast. He pretended not to notice. The storm remained merciless, forcing them into a rhythm dictated by necessity. Tending the fire, keeping water melted, checking Rose's fever, scraping together simple meals from John's modest supplies. Each task felt strangely intimate in the small cabin where there was nowhere to hide. Not from each other, not from their own thoughts. By the second evening, the blizzard had become a living thing, roaring against the roof, rattling the shuttered windows. Evelyn sat near the fire with Anna resting at her side, while John repaired a broken latch at the door. She watched him work, the muscles in his forearms tightening as he hammered a nail into place with deliberate, controlled strength. "You built this cabin?" she asked. He didn't look up. "All of it. It's solid." It had to be. There was something buried beneath those words, something heavy and painful. Evelyn waited, sensing he might speak more. Not because she expected it, but because the storm had stripped away so much already that vulnerability felt almost inevitable. John set the hammer down with a soft clink. "I lost my family here," he said quietly. Evelyn's breath caught, She had not expected him to say it so plainly. My wife, Sarah. My boy, Daniel. 2 winters ago. Fire started in the old kitchen. I was out on the range. By the time I got back, his jaw tightened. Nothing left but embers. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier. Evelyn swallowed. I'm sorry, she whispered, understanding more than she wanted to. John nodded once, as if accepting her sympathy, but unwilling to linger in it. Building this place again was something to do. Something that made me get up in the morning. The blaze in the fireplace snapped sharply, echoing the fracture inside him. Evelyn lowered her gaze to her hands, remembering her own losses. The sickness that took her husband, the long journey west, believing Benjamin would meet them in Millbrook, the weeks of fear and hunger that forced her to steal. I understand what it's like, she murmured. Losing everything. His eyes met hers, steady, sincere, and unbearably human. You haven't lost everything, he said. The words were soft, but carved deeper than he knew. Evelyn felt something shift inside her, something warm and frightening, something she had long kept buried beneath layers of survival and exhaustion. The next day brought no change in the storm, but revealed the deepening thread between them. When Rose groaned with fresh chills, John knelt beside the cot, his hand hovering over her forehead before touching gently. His concern was not an obligation, it was instinct. Evelyn watched him tuck an extra blanket around her daughter, and something in her chest tightened. Gratitude mixed with an ache she didn't dare name. Later, as Evelyn chopped vegetables for a thin stew, John stepped behind her to place more wood beside the stove. The closeness startled her. She felt the warmth of his breath, heard the quiet rhythm of his movements. Her pulse quickened. She focused on the knife, refusing to turn. You cook like someone who's done this a long time, he said, voice low. I've had to, she replied. He hesitated. You don't owe me anything for being here. She stiffened. I know. You act like you're waiting for a price. Her shoulders lifted slightly. Kindness always comes with one, not mine. The conviction in his tone rattled her more than any threat could have. She finally turned to face him. People don't help for nothing, John. Out here especially. He studied her for a long moment. Your girls needed a warm place. That's enough. It shouldn't have sounded like a promise, but it did. That night, with the storm battering the cabin harder than ever, Evelyn woke to the faint creak of wood. John stood near the window, lantern raised, scanning the swirling darkness beyond the glass. A shadow of unease shaped his stance. What is it? She whispered. Tracks, he said. Fresh ones. Hard to see clearly, but something's moving through the storm. Fear slid cold through her spine. Boone? Maybe, maybe not. John set the lantern down. Either way, stay close tomorrow. Blizzard won't hide us forever. The storm was no longer their only danger. Something was out there. Watching, waiting, drawing closer with a howling wind. Inside the small cabin, 2 wounded souls sat awake long after the others slept. The fire burned low, casting warm light across faces marked by hardship, hope, and unspoken connection. And in that quiet glow, the truth settled in silently between them. Trust, once extinguished, was returning. Slowly, carefully, with the same fragile persistence as the snow falling outside. The storm broke on the 4th morning, not with sunlight or calm skies, but with a strange, brittle silence, the kind that felt like the world was holding its breath. Evelyn sensed it immediately. The air inside the cabin was warmer than it had been in days, yet a cold unease threaded through her ribs as she wrapped Rose in a blanket. Anna lingered closer than usual, her small hand gripping Evelyn's sleeve with quiet insistence. John had risen before dawn. He paced from window to door, checking shadows, listening for sounds the wind no longer swallowed. When he stepped out onto the porch to survey the land, Evelyn watched him through the frosted glass. His posture was rigid, shoulders drawn tight, eyes narrowing at something beyond her sight. When he came back in, he shut the door with deliberate care. "Tracks," he said. "Human, more than one." Evelyn's stomach tightened. "Boone?" "Hard to say." His voice carried a weight she had learned to respect. But whoever it was, they were close. Close meant danger, and danger out here always carried the same name: Calvin Boone. The hours passed with a tension that refused to ease. John kept the rifle propped against the table. Evelyn kept the girls near the hearth. The storm had trapped them, but this new fear, this new quiet, felt far worse. It felt like someone lurking just beyond the edge of sight. They ate a meager lunch, and though John tried to mask it, he kept glancing at the door, at the windows, at the spaces where shadows shifted a little too easily. "Should we leave?" Evelyn asked finally. "Not yet." John's gaze hardened. "If Boone's out there, better we stay behind strong walls than walk right into him." She nodded, though her pulse beat too fast for agreement to truly settle. Rose coughed weakly, and Evelyn held her closer. Every motherly instinct screamed to flee, but logic chained her to the cabin floor. By mid-afternoon, when the sky darkened again with early winter dusk, the knock came. Not a frantic pounding, not an urgent plea, just one single deliberate knock. Anna jumped. Evelyn froze where she stood. John reached for the rifle and held a finger to his lips. He approached the door silently, every muscle drawn tight, and opened it an inch. Snow drifted in, and behind it, Calvin Boone, tall, gaunt, a face carved from hunger and malice. His coat hung open, revealing pistols at both hips. 3 men stood behind him, each looking like they'd been dragged out of hell and given guns for company. Boone smiled slowly, showing a row of uneven teeth. "Afternoon, Reeves." John didn't open the door wider. "You're trespassing. Storm ended. Roads are clear enough for visiting." Boone tilted his head, peering past John. "Heard you picked up strays." Evelyn stiffened at the word. Anna grabbed her hand, breath trembling. John planted himself firmly in the doorway. "Whatever you want, you're not getting it here." Boone chuckled, low and amused. "Kindness never suited you much, John." "Shame. Always figured you'd break eventually." John's grip tightened on the rifle. Boone lifted his hands in mock surrender. "Relax. Not here to shoot up the place. Just need food, whiskey, maybe some supplies." "You'll get nothing." Boone clicked his tongue. "That so?" The standoff stretched long enough for Evelyn's throat to dry. She imagined the men forcing their way in. She imagined her girls screaming. She imagined the blood that would follow. Then Boone leaned in, lowering his voice. "Storms change things. Folks out here are easier pickings now. Hungry, afraid. You protecting someone in there, Reeves?" His smile sharpened. "I can smell fear like smoke." John didn't answer. Boone stepped back, tapping ash from a cigarette onto the snow. "Well, if you're unwilling to share, we'll come by another time." He took 3 steps away before turning again, eyes glinting with cruel promise. "And Reeves, next time, lock your windows better." John slammed the door before Evelyn could gasp. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was the wind seeping through the cracks. Anna hid her face in Evelyn's skirt. Rose whimpered softly. Evelyn whispered, "He knows we're here." John leaned back against the door, breath shaky but controlled. "Yes, and he'll be back." Their fragile safety was gone. The cabin no longer felt like a shield, it felt like a trap. As night fell, John checked every window latch twice, then taught Evelyn where to stand if shooting became necessary. She listened, numb and terrified. She had held a gun before, but never with stakes like this. "You won't need to fire unless I tell you," he assured her. "What if he breaks in while you're outside?" she asked. He stopped, met her eyes. Something unspoken passed between them. Fear, determination, and something warmer beneath the surface. Something neither of them had asked for, but had grown between them anyway. "I won't let that happen," he said quietly. The hours crawled. The world outside was ink black, thick with unease. Evelyn paced with Rose in her arms. John sat by the window, rifle across his lap. His presence alone steadied her, but fear gnawed at the edges of her calm. At some point past midnight, Anna woke crying from a nightmare. Evelyn soothed her, humming softly. John watched from the shadows, his expression pulled tight with equal parts resolve and unexpected gentleness. "Evelyn," he said softly, once the child had calmed. "I'm going to have to leave soon. Boone isn't just a threat to us. He's tearing the whole county apart." The words hit harder than the cold. "Leave? When?" "Soon as the storm breaks enough for travel. They're forming a vigilante group in Millbrook. He needs to be stopped." Evelyn's heartbeat stumbled. She hated Boone, feared him, wanted him gone. But the thought of John riding into danger felt like something sharp lodged beneath her ribs. "You don't owe this town your life," she said. "No," he replied, gaze steady. "But I owe them my help. And I owe you and the girls a safe place to sleep without jumping at shadows." Emotion thickened her voice. "We can't repay what you've already done." He stepped closer. "I didn't ask for repayment." The air between them shifted. Warm, fragile, electric. Evelyn looked away first, unable to bear the weight of what she felt. Out in the wilderness, a wolf howled, a long, mournful sound that carried through the frozen air. Inside the cabin, two people who never meant to need each other stood barely inches apart, bound now not just by survival, but by something quieter and far more dangerous: connection. Boone had shattered their peace, but he had also revealed the bond taking shape in the cracks. Morning came without color. The sky hung in a pale, unsettled gray, as if the storm had drained the world of every shade except fear. Evelyn stood at the window, her breath fogging the cold glass, while John saddled his horse outside. Each pull of the leather strap echoed through her chest like a countdown she wasn't ready for. Anna sat quietly on the edge of the bed, clutching Rose's hand. Even the little girl sensed the tension. She watched John with wide, worried eyes, as if she already understood that safety was a fragile thing. Evelyn stepped outside, wrapping her shawl tighter. The air bit at her cheeks, sharp and metallic. "You're leaving today?" she said. John paused, adjusting the rifle holster. "The men in Millbrook are gathering at first light. Boone's gang is moving west, and if we don't stop him now..." His jaw clenched. "He'll come back here." The words were true, necessary, logical. Yet Evelyn felt them like a slow tear through fabric. "You don't know what you'll face out there." John looked at her, really looked at her. "I know what happens if I don't go." Silence pressed between them, heavy as snowfall. The horse snorted, shifting its weight. Evelyn's breath caught. She hadn't realized until this moment that part of her had believed John might stay, if only because she wanted him to. "We'll manage," she whispered. "I know you will." His voice softened. "You're stronger than you think, Evelyn." She had never needed strength more. He hesitated, as if fighting the battle between duty and something deeply personal. Then he stepped closer. Not close enough to touch her, but close enough that she felt the warmth rising from his coat, the sincerity in his quiet presence. "If anything happens," he said, lowering his voice, "Henry and Eleanor Wallace will look out for you. Trust them." Evelyn swallowed hard. "And you? Should we trust you'll come back?" John didn't smile, but something flickered in his gaze, a promise or a confession he wasn't ready to voice. "I'll try." He mounted the horse. Snow crunched beneath the hooves, brittle as glass. Evelyn wanted to speak, to beg him to be careful, to tell him he mattered more than he realized. But the words lodged in her throat. Instead, she stepped back, pulling her daughters close. John rode off without looking back. Perhaps because looking back meant staying, life without him settled uneasily into the cabin. Days stretched long and quiet, punctuated only by the wind against the shutters or Rose's soft breathing as she recovered. But beneath that silence lingered John's presence, his careful repairs, his neatly arranged tools, the empty place near the stove where he used to sit sharpening knives. Evelyn found herself reaching for tasks the way one reaches for familiar hands in the dark. She chopped wood, poorly at first, swinging the axe until sweat mixed with cold air. She tended the fire, cooked sparse meals, mended Anna's coat, and whispered night prayers she hadn't uttered in years. Each day, she grew more aware of how much John had carried alone, and how much she feared he would not return to this quiet, half-healed home. One morning, Henry Wallace rode up with news. Evelyn met him on the porch, heart hammering. "The men reached Boone's trail," he told her. "Tracked him near Black Canyon. Reeves is with them." "Is he safe?" she asked. Henry hesitated. "Safer than most. He knows the land better than anyone." Relief and dread pooled together in Evelyn's chest. She thanked him, though her voice trembled. The days that followed felt endless. Each time the wind changed, she imagined hoofbeats. Each time a branch snapped, she imagined gunfire. She worked through the fear with a stubborn determination, driven by fierce necessity. Her daughters needed her to be strong, and John had believed she could be. At night, when the cabin grew too quiet, Evelyn found herself reliving their last conversation. "He'll try." It was not a vow, yet it had rooted inside her like a truth she desperately wanted to trust. Even Rose asked, "Mama, when is Mr. Reeves coming home?" "Soon," Evelyn whispered, brushing her daughter's cheek. "He promised he'd try." On the 11th day, the news arrived first. Boone had been caught. Henry brought the message with a smile, weary from hours of riding. They cornered him in the canyon. Reeves was there. The gang's broken, the danger's ending. Evelyn gripped the doorframe to steady herself. "Is he hurt?" "He took a fall down a ridge," Henry said. "But he's alive. Bruised, scraped, but alive." Alive. The word was a warm shock spreading through her chest, loosening something she'd kept clenched for too long. That night, she could hardly sleep. Each shift of wind made her sit up, listening, waiting, hoping. Even Anna stayed awake longer than usual, trying to hide how often she glanced toward the door. Snow fell lightly the next morning, soft and bright, as if the world had finally exhaled. Evelyn stirred a pot of porridge, her hands trembling despite the calm. Then she heard it, the distant crunch of hooves over frozen earth. Her breath stopped. John appeared through the trees, riding slowly, shoulders slumped with exhaustion. His coat was torn at the sleeve, and there was dried blood along his jaw. But he was upright, alive. And when he saw Evelyn on the porch, he sat a little straighter, as if her presence alone pulled him back to solid ground. Evelyn stepped forward before she realized she'd moved. John dismounted, wincing. She reached out instinctively, touching his arm, not out of obligation, but relief so powerful it broke through her restraint. "You came back," she said, voice low. John looked at her with a softness that carried weeks of unspoken truths. "I told you I'd try." For a moment, neither moved. Snow drifted lazily around them, melting in the heat rising between two people who had survived storms, of winter, of fear of their own wounded histories. Anna and Rose rushed out, calling his name. John laughed softly, kneeling despite the ache in his ribs as they embraced him. And Evelyn watched, heart unfolding in ways she could no longer deny. His return did not promise a simple future, but it promised something. Something fragile. Something hopeful. Something they now shared. And for the first time in a long time, Evelyn felt the quiet beginnings of freedom. Not from danger, but from the loneliness she thought would follow her forever. Spring did not arrive all at once. It crept slowly into the valley, melting the edges of snowbanks, softening the frozen ground, and breathing life back into the land John Reeves had fought so long to keep together. Evelyn Carter felt the shift long before she saw it. The air in the cabin grew less brittle. Rose's cough faded. Anna laughed again, freely, as if childhood finally felt like something she was allowed to return to. And John, still bruised, still healing, moved through the days with a steadiness that carried something warmer than determination. It carried belonging. The danger had passed, but its shadow had changed them. Evelyn felt it each morning as she stepped onto the porch, watching the sky blush with pink above the pines. She felt it in the way John lingered near her while they worked, handing her tools, teaching her to split logs properly, brushing past her with a look that stayed on her skin long after he'd walked away. Their connection, once born of necessity, had quietly grown into something deeper, something neither of them dared name aloud, not yet. But both lived inside as naturally as breath. One cool evening, as John reinforced the chicken coop, a rider appeared on the ridge. Evelyn saw the silhouette first, broad shoulders, a familiar hat, and her heart kicked hard against her ribs. For a moment she feared Boone had returned, impossible as it was. But when the rider approached, and when the face beneath the hat broke into a trembling smile, her breath caught completely. "Benjamin," she whispered. Her brother swung down from the saddle before the horse fully stopped. Evelyn ran to him, emotion tightening her voice as she threw her arms around him. He held her fiercely, burying his face in her hair with a choked sound she had never heard from him before. "I'm so damn sorry, Evie," he rasped. "I should have been there. I should have met you. You're here now," she said, pulling back, wiping at tears she didn't expect to shed. "You're here, and we're alive. That's what matters." Anna and Rose clung to him next, their joy bright and immediate. Benjamin's eyes softened when he saw how thin they still were, how the winter had carved shadows across their small faces. His guilt returned, but John stepped forward, offering a firm handshake. "You must be Reeves," Benjamin said. "I've heard enough to owe you my thanks." John nodded, modest as always. "Your family's strong. They didn't survive because of me. They survived because they refused not to." Benjamin let out a quiet breath, looking between his sister and the man who had sheltered her. Something understanding passed through his gaze, though he said nothing more. The weeks that followed carried the rhythm of a world rebuilding itself. The danger Boone brought was gone, and for the first time, Evelyn felt she could plan beyond each passing day. Benjamin stayed, taking up work beside John without hesitation. Together they repaired broken fences, dug new irrigation lines, and cleared brush that winter storms had scattered. Evelyn watched them, their movements synchronized in that effortless way men share when they work toward something bigger than themselves. It did not take long before the ranch no longer felt like John's home alone. It felt like a place being reborn. Evelyn began her own quiet transformation. With Henry Wallace's help, she applied for the teaching position in Millbrook. She spent evenings practicing letters with Anna, who soaked up every moment. And she found comfort in the gentle tasks of living, cooking real meals again, stitching curtains for the windows, brushing Rose's hair in sunlight instead of lamplight. One afternoon, while the girls played by the creek, Evelyn joined John in the garden where he planted sprouted potatoes saved from the winter. She knelt beside him, fingers digging into warm soil. "Feels strange," she murmured. working the ground like we've already earned tomorrow. John leaned back on his heels, looking at her the way he often did. Steady, unguarded, with an affection that might one day be spoken. You have earned it. All three of you. You gave us the chance, she said softly. He shook his head. You took it. That's different. They fell into silence, the kind that no longer felt heavy or uncertain. Birds sang in the trees. The creek whispered in the distance. The air smelled like earth and new beginnings. Evelyn, John said at last, his voice gentler than she'd ever heard it. I don't know what the future holds, but I'd like you and the girls to be part of it. Her breath shivered. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she placed her hand over his. An honest gesture, quiet and sure. John didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even breathe for a moment. His hand turned, fingers brushing hers with a warmth that settled deep. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't a promise. It was something in between, something real enough to build a life on. Summer washed over the land in gold. The valley greened. Livestock returned to grazing. Wildflowers scattered across the meadows like small, colorful miracles. When Evelyn rode into Millbrook for her first day as a schoolteacher, she wore a simple blue dress that Anna had chosen. And John watched her go with a pride he didn't bother hiding. Benjamin waved from the barn, grinning as the girls shouted good luck from the wagon. Evenings brought them all together. John fixing tools on the porch while Benjamin told outrageous stories that made the girls giggle uncontrollably. Evelyn laughing quietly as she folded laundry nearby. Sometimes John glanced at her with that same softened look, as if he too recognized this life was no longer temporary. One night, after the girls had gone to bed, Evelyn stepped outside and found John waiting under the lantern light. He said nothing at first, and neither did she. The quiet around them was not a void, but a fullness. One built from survival, sacrifice, and the unexpected tenderness that had grown through every hardship. Feels peaceful, Evelyn whispered. John nodded. Feels like a beginning. She exhaled, long and slow, letting the warmth of his words settle inside her chest. Yes, she murmured. It does. Behind them, the cabin glowed like a second chance. Ahead of them lay a future, undefined, but full of promise. And for the first time since the winter began, Evelyn Carter felt completely, undeniably safe. The summer evening drifted softly toward dusk as Evelyn stood beside the porch, the warm air carrying the scent of pine and sun-touched earth. John's footsteps slowed behind her, steady and familiar, and she felt a quiet calm wrap around her like a comforting hand. The hardships of winter, the hunger, the fear, the cruel shadow of Boone, seemed far away now, softened by time and by the life they had built from those broken days. She listened to the laughter of her daughters inside, to Benjamin stacking tools in the barn, to the small, peaceful rhythm of a ranch no longer haunted by danger. And in that gentle stillness, she realized that safety wasn't just the absence of fear. It was the presence of people who chose to stay. John stepped beside her, saying nothing, but his nearness spoke with a warmth she felt in every breath. She closed her eyes, letting the moment stretch, slow and easy, like a soft promise carried on the wind. Whatever tomorrow held, they would face it together, steadily, quietly, with a kind of hope born only from surviving the darkest storms. And in that fading light, everything felt beautifully, deeply possible. End of article. Good night.